Excuse me, that baby has my eyes?
What? Really?
Yes, look.
Welcome to the channel, lovelies. Please like and subscribe. Naomi Carter was 31 years old, tired and done. Done with New York. Done with the man who had looked her in the eye and said the baby wasn't his. Done with the apartment she could no longer afford alone. The friends who had quietly picked sides. The city that had swallowed 3 of the best years of her life and given her nothing back except stretch marks and a broken engagement ring she'd already sold. She was done with all of it. What she had left was 2 suitcases, a carry-on that was slightly too heavy, and a 2-year-old boy named Eli strapped to her left hip like he belonged there. He was the only thing in her life that had never disappointed her. She moved through JFK's departure hall, the way you move when you're carrying too much and pretending you're not. In Gate 6 was at the far end of Terminal 4, and her boarding time was in 40 minutes, and she was not going to cry in this airport. She had made herself that promise in the cab. Eli was quiet for once, his cheek resting warm against her shoulder, his small fingers wrapped loosely around the strap of her bag. He had her dark brown skin, her round nose, her stubborn mouth, but he had eyes that had always puzzled her. Grey-green, pale and striking, the kind of eyes that made strangers stop and comment. She'd always written them off as a genetic surprise. Something recessive, something from a family tree she hadn't thought hard enough about. She was almost at the gate when Eli lifted his head. She felt it before she saw it, the way he went still on her hip. That specific stillness children get when something has caught their full attention. She followed his gaze without thinking, and then she understood her son was staring. The man was tall. That was the first thing. He had the aura of quiet authority in the way he stood that made the crowd around him seem to part without knowing why. He was Korean, somewhere in his mid-30s, and he had stopped walking completely. He was staring at Eli, not the way strangers sometimes stared, admiring her son's unique eyes. Not with the mild curiosity people aimed at a pretty child. This was different. This was a man who had seen something that knocked the air out of him and was working very hard not to show it. His face was composed, his posture was controlled, but his eyes, grey-green, pale and striking, the exact shade, the exact shape. His eyes were doing something she had no language for. Naomi's arm tightened around her son. The man blinked. Then, slowly, he walked towards them and crouched. Just slightly, just enough to bring himself closer to Eli's level. And Eli, her son who screamed at the pediatrician and hid behind her leg at the park, stared back at the stranger with complete calm, like he recognized something. The man straightened. He cleared his throat once, then spoke. "I apologize for this," he said. His English was perfect, accented lightly. His voice was low. "I don't make a habit of approaching strangers, but I need to ask you something, and I want you to know before I do that I mean no disrespect to you or your child." Naomi shifted Eli higher on her hip. "You have about 30 seconds. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "My name is Jae-won Oh. I'm in New York on business." He paused. "Your son's eyes, that color, that specific shade. I need to know, have we met before, 'cause your baby has my eyes?" "Excuse me?" Her voice came out flat. "I know how this sounds." He held her gaze. "I know exactly how this sounds. But those eyes are not common. They are specific to my family's bloodline. My father had them. My grandfather had them. I have them." Another pause. "And I have never in my life seen them on anyone outside of my family." Naomi stared at him. The gate announcement came over the speaker behind her, her flight, beginning to board, and she heard it the way you hear things underwater. "You need to walk away," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm finding that I can't." She almost laughed. It came out wrong. "You're telling me you think my son—" She stopped, because even as the words formed, something else was forming too. Something quiet and cold at the back of her mind. The shape of Eli's jaw, the way he held his hands when he was thinking, fingers loose, palms slightly forward. She had always thought that was Michael. She had always filed it under Michael, her ex, even though Michael had denied Eli so completely, so immediately, that she had never looked too closely again, because looking closely hurt, and she knew she had never been with anyone else. "I'm not telling you anything," Jaewon said carefully. "I'm asking. That's all I'm doing right now, just asking." She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know you." "No, you don't. I have a flight to catch." "I know. Your gate is boarding." "So what exactly are you proposing here?" The word proposing came out sharper than she meant it. He didn't flinch. "A DNA test, that's all. And one test." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a card. Matte black, simple, just his name and a number. "I'm in New York for 2 weeks. If the test comes back with no match, you never hear from me again. I disappear completely. You go to the UK, you live your life, and this conversation never happened." "And why would I do that?" He held her gaze. "You don't owe me anything. I just want certainty, please." She thought for a while and responded, "And where am I supposed to stay while we wait for this test?" "I have a penthouse on the Upper East Side. You would have your own wing, your own bathroom, your own entrance if you want it, your own key. My staff is discreet. You are free to leave at any moment, no questions asked." He paused. "I won't crowd you. I won't interrogate you. I won't make a single demand until we have results." She looked down at Eli. Eli had lost interest in the stranger and was now pulling at the collar of her shirt with great focus. She looked back up. Her flight was boarding. She could hear the final call creeping closer. She had a life waiting for her in London, a cousin's spare room, a job possibility, a plan that had taken her 4 months to scrape together. She had a reason to walk away from this man and everything he was suggesting. She also had a son with grey-green eyes she had never been able to explain. "One test," she said. "One test," he confirmed. She pulled out her phone. "I'm going to need that penthouse address before I change my mind." The Upper East Side penthouse was the kind of place Naomi had only ever seen in magazines she flipped through at the dentist. The room they gave her was down a private hallway, separated from the main living space by a heavy door that locked from her side. It had a window seat and a crib already assembled in the corner, and a basket of Eli's approximate size, in clothing sitting folded on the dresser. She stood in the doorway looking at that basket for a long time. She came back out to the living room, where Jaewon was standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He had a phone in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at Eli, who had climbed off her hip the moment they walked in, and was now standing in the middle of the rug, turning in a slow circle to take in the room. "He's not shy," Jaewon said. "Never has been." She crossed her arms. "The clothes in the basket. You did that fast." "I had people," he said simply. "I hope the sizes are right. I guessed from what I could see." "You guessed." "I have a good eye." She almost said something sharp. Instead, she watched Eli complete his circle and walk directly to Jaewon and grab his trouser leg. Jaewon looked down. Something crossed his face, fast, almost hidden, but she caught it. She was watching too closely not to catch it. He crouched down to Eli's level. "Hello," he said. Eli looked up at him with those eyes. "Hi," he said, because it was one of 12 words he had. "Can I pick you up?" Eli answered by raising both arms. Naomi watched this man she had met 4 hours ago lift her son with a practiced ease that suggested he was not entirely unfamiliar with children, and she felt the ground shift slightly under her feet. Not dramatically, just slightly. The days that followed had a rhythm she hadn't expected. Jaewon left early and came back late, and in between, he moved through the penthouse with a quiet considerateness that never felt like performance. He texted before coming home. Not because she had asked him to, but because he had apparently decided she deserved the warning. He knocked before opening any door she might be behind. He had the kitchen stocked with things she hadn't mentioned, but somehow he knew, which unsettled her until she realized he had just looked at what she'd eaten on day one and made notes. "You watched what I ate," she said on the third morning. He was reading something on his laptop at the kitchen table. He looked up. "You're feeding a toddler and yourself in a city where you don't have a support system. And making sure there's food you'll actually eat seemed like a reasonable thing to do." She poured her coffee. "That's either thoughtful or slightly unsettling. Both things can be true." She sat down across from him. It was the closest they'd sat to each other without a formal reason, and she felt the slight awkwardness of it. He seemed to feel it too. He went back to his screen. She looked out the window. "He slept through the night," she said. Jae-won looked up again. "First time?" "Second. He slept through on day 2 as well." She shook her head. "He never does that at home." "Did. At home." Jae-won was quiet for a moment. "Children are sensitive to environment." "I know." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "He likes it here." "Do you?" The question was careful. Not loaded, not pointed. Careful. She looked at him. I don't not like it," she said. He nodded once, like that was enough, and went back to his laptop. She didn't know what she'd expected from him. She had walked in here prepared for pressure, for manipulation, for the slow creep of entitlement she'd learned to smell on men with money. She had been prepared to fight for her space, for her dignity, for Eli's safety. She had her phone charged, and a plan, and a cousin's number memorized. But Jae-won-oh was not like that. He was precise and private, and occasionally funny, in a way that felt accidental, like he hadn't meant to be, and wasn't sure how to take it back. He read Eli a book on the 4th evening, without being asked, sitting on the living room floor with Eli in his lap, voice flat and steady, mispronouncing 2 of the animal names and not stopping to correct himself. Eli fell asleep against his arm before they got to the last page. Jae-won sat still for 10 full minutes before he moved, like he didn't want to break it. Naomi stood in the hallway and watched the whole thing, and did not name what she felt. She was disciplined about that. She did not name it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. It was plain. White. A medical facility's name in the corner. Jae-won brought it in from the reception desk himself and set it on the dining table without opening it. He texted her from the other side of the penthouse. She read it, put down Eli's spoon, and walked out. They sat across from each other. The envelope between them. Eli was napping. Naomi picked it up first. Her hands were steady. She was proud of that. She opened it, unfolded the single page, read the relevant line, and set it down on the table so he could see it. He read it. He was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said. "That's impossible," she said. And then neither of them spoke for almost a full minute, which felt both too long and not nearly long enough. When could this have happened? Is there a mistake? Could samples be wrong? Jae-won orders a second confirmation test. Same result. But here is what neither of them knew. 3 years ago, before that envelope landed on a dining table in that penthouse, 2 people who had never met were having the worst nights of their lives in the same building. They just didn't know they were in the same building. This is what actually happened. Jae-won-oh landed at JFK on a Thursday in late October with a tension headache he hadn't been able to shake since Seoul, and he had been in back-to-back negotiations for 11 days straight. A merger that should have taken 4 months had been compressed into 1, and the kind of men he worked with did not accept exhaustion as a reason to slow down. He checked into the hotel on 57th Street, changed into a tuxedo he didn't want to wear, and went to the Meridian Foundation Gala because his attendance had been announced 3 weeks ago, and cancelling would have cost him 2 relationships he couldn't afford to lose. The gala was exactly what he expected. loud, expensive, full of people performing their importance at each other. His fiancée, So-yeon, was supposed to fly in from Seoul that evening and meet him at the gala. She had texted at 8 p.m. to say her flight was delayed. She would be at the hotel by midnight. She had booked them into room 9. He should go up when he was ready, and she would find him. He was ready by 10. The negotiations that week had broken something in him that he hadn't had time to examine. He found a quiet corner of the gala bar, and he drank some whiskey. A colleague pressed a second glass on him, then a third. By 11:30, Jae-won-oh, who prided himself on control in every room he entered, was not in control. He told the bartender he was going up. He remembered the number wrong. He knew it was room 9, but entered room 6. He didn't notice the difference. The door was unlocked. The room was dim. He stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed and pressed his palms against his eyes and thought about nothing for a moment, which was the first time he had thought about nothing in 11 days. The relief of it was almost physical. Now here is Naomi's side of the same night. Naomi Carter had been engaged to Michael Webb for 8 months, and for roughly 6 of those months she had understood, without letting herself say it out loud, that she had made a mistake. Michael was handsome and charming and ambitious in the way that had felt exciting at 28 and felt suffocating at 29. He never said anything cruel enough to leave a mark. He was just absent, present in the room and absent in every way that mattered. She had been trying to decide what to do about that for 6 months when he proposed, and she had said yes because she was tired and because she loved him, or had loved him, or wanted to love him. She had never been fully clear on which one it was. The engagement party was for her college friend Diane, Tan, who was marrying a man who looked at her the way Naomi sometimes caught herself wishing Michael would look at her. It was being held in the event suite of a hotel on 57th Street. Naomi wore a black stunning dress she had bought on sale and spent too long on her hair, and arrived feeling both overdressed and invisible, which was a specific kind of awful. Michiel had texted at 9 to say he was running late. He texted again at 10 to say the work thing was running over. He texted at 11 to say he was on his way. He was sorry. He'd be there in 20 minutes, wait for him in room 6. He'd booked it so they could have somewhere quiet to talk. She texted back fine and went to get another drink first, because the talking Michael wanted to do never felt good lately, and she wanted the edge taken off before it started. By the time she took the elevator to the 6th floor, she had had more than she should have. The hallway was very quiet after the noise of the party. Room 6 was unlocked. She went in, kicked off her heels, and went to the bathroom to run cold water on her wrists and look at herself in the mirror and give herself a small, firm talk about being patient. She came out to find someone sitting in the dark on the edge of the bed. She thought it was Michiel. He had said he was 20 minutes away. She thought he had made better time. The room was dim. The curtains were half drawn. She was not wearing her glasses. He said something quiet back, something that sounded like an apology, and she thought he was apologizing for being late, for the work thing, for the 6 months of absence she had been cataloguing in silence. She sat down next to him. He said something else, softer. She was tired and sad, and had drunk too much red wine, and she leaned into him, the way you lean into someone when you have been waiting for them to hold you for a very long time. He put his arm around her, and for a little while, neither of them said anything at all. The rest of that night happened the way things happen when two people are sad and drunk and starving for something they cannot name. In a dark room where neither of them could see clearly, and both of them had stopped thinking carefully, it was not dramatic. It was quiet and hazy and over before either of them had fully understood what it was. Jae-won's phone rang at midnight. His business partner from Seoul, a call he had been expecting and could not ignore. He stepped out into the hallway to take it. He meant to come back. He got pulled into the call for 40 minutes, and by the time it ended, he was standing near the elevator, and everything from the previous 2 hours felt like something that had happened at a great distance. He went to room 9, his original room instead of room 6. So Yon had arrived 20 minutes before him, tired from her flight, and fell asleep quickly. He lay in the dark and thought about the merger, and tried not to think about how much he had drunk, and whether the evening had gone the way he thought it had, or whether he had simply passed out and dreamed something. He told himself it was the alcohol. He filed it in the part of himself where he filed things he didn't have time for, and he went to sleep. Michael arrived at room 6 at 1:15, flushed and apologetic, smelling like his office and late nights. Naomi was half asleep. He climbed in next to her and wanted to be with her, but she was half tired and sleepy to indulge him again, or so she thought. Neither of them talked about the 6 months of quiet misery, because it was too late, and she was too tired, and he was apparently too comfortable to start a hard conversation at 1 in the morning. She thought about what had happened in the dark and assumed it was Michael. She told herself the blur of the evening was the wine. She had a long list of things she was telling herself that year, and she added this to it and moved on. Life continued normally, the way life does when it is building towards something you cannot see yet. 6 weeks later, Soyeon sat Jaewon down and told him the truth about a man she had been seeing in Seoul for almost a year. She said it was serious. She said she was sorry. She said she should have told him sooner. Jaewon listened to all of it with the stillness of a man who has learned that stillness is its own kind of weapon, and then he ended the engagement in 4 sentences, and he went back to running his empire, and he did not look back, because looking back was not something he had ever known how to do. 3 months after the gala, Naomi sat on the bathroom floor of her apartment at 7 in the morning, looking at a positive pregnancy test, and the first thing she felt was a complicated, terrifying joy that she immediately tried to be sensible about. She told Michel that night over dinner. She watched his face, and she knew from his face, from the way something changed in his eyes before he blurted out rudely, denying the pregnancy. He said it wasn't his. He said it with so much cruelty, on raising his voice, a flat, clean denial delivered like a business decision. The truth she would not fully let herself see until much later, was that Michael had never not wanted to be a father specifically. He had never not wanted Eli. He had not wanted to stay. He had not wanted the weight of a life he hadn't planned on, with a woman he had been quietly exiting for months before the pregnancy gave him the cleaner excuse he needed. The baby wasn't the problem. Commitment was the problem. So he left. She raised Eli alone. She worked 2 jobs and loved her son ferociously before everything came crumbling. Life became difficult. Then she decided to start afresh elsewhere, which brings us back to the moment she went to catch a flight. And a man with unique eyes like her son saw them. And now they were sitting in a penthouse with a piece of paper between them, and 3 years of a story none of them had all the pages to, and the part they were still missing. The part they hadn't put together yet, the room number, the wrong door, the wine and the grief, and the series of small, terrible assumptions. That part was still sitting quietly in the gap between what they remembered and what they knew. But they were interrupted by a phone call. He looked at the screen, and his expression carried a particular weight of a responsibility he couldn't set down. He looked up at her immediately, but he didn't answer it at first. The first thing he did was look at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is the meeting I came to New York for. I've been pushing it back all week, and I can't push it again." He paused. I wouldn't leave right now if I had any other choice." "Go," she said. "It's fine." He stood, but he didn't move toward the door immediately. He picked up the paper from the table and slid it carefully back toward her side, like he was returning something that belonged to her. Then he buttoned the top button of his shirt, reached for his jacket from the back of the chair, and paused with it in his hand. "When I come back," he said, "I'd like to finish this conversation. Properly, if you're willing." He said it the way he said most things, quietly, without pressure, leaving the door entirely open for her to walk through or not. "There's no rush. We have time now. That's the one thing we actually have," she nodded once. "I'll be here." Something in his face settled. He answered the call on his way to the study, his voice already shifting into the composed, controlled register of a man conducting serious business, and the door closed behind him with a soft, careful click. And she was alone with the paper and the silence and everything they were still close to understanding but hadn't reached yet. Days later, he came back at 7:30 in the evening. She heard the front door, then the quiet exchange between him and the housekeeper, then his footsteps down the hall. Eli was already bathed and in pajamas, sitting on the living room rug with his blocks. And when Jaewon appeared in the doorway, he looked at the boy first, the way she had noticed he always did, like checking that something important was still where he had left it. "How did it go?" she asked. "Well enough." He loosened his tie and sat on the floor next to Eli without ceremony. Without changing his clothes first, without any of the performance of a man who thought he was too important for a rug. Eli immediately handed him a block. He accepted it seriously. "Have you eaten?" "Not yet." He looked up. "Can I order something? There's a place nearby. They do this jjigae that's—" He stopped. "You might not like it." "Order it," she said. "I'll try anything once." Something in his face relaxed. He pulled out his phone, ordered, and then set it face down on the carpet, which she had come to understand was his way of saying he was present, that the rest of it could wait. They ate at the dining table after Eli went down. For a while they just ate and talked about nothing consequential. He asked about her cousin in London. She asked about Seoul. Then she put her fork down and said, "So, that night." He put his down too. That night." "Eli is too," she said. "So whatever happened 3 years ago." "Yes." He nodded. 3 years ago, I was in New York, late October. I remember it clearly because it was a difficult trip, a business negotiation that had been running for weeks. I was exhausted. He paused. There was a gala. The Meridian Foundation fundraiser. That was the main event I attended. She looked at him. "I've lived in New York my whole life. I was here 3 years ago. I was here 2 years ago. I've always been here." She shook her head slowly. "But I don't know anything about a Meridian Foundation gala. That wasn't my world." "What do you remember about that period?" he asked. She thought about it. "I was engaged to Michiel. Things were not good between us, but I was trying. I remember going to my friend Diane's engagement party that October. It was a whole thing. Big venue, open bar, lots of people I didn't know." "Where was it?" "The 57th Street. He looked up. "What?" she said. "The gala was on 57th Street. She stared at him. Neither of them moved for a second. "Same street," she said carefully. "Could be the same building," he said. "There's a hotel on that block. The gala was held there. They had the main ballroom and the event suites running simultaneously that night." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "The party was in an event suite, ground floor." She shook her head slowly. "But I still don't. I mean, even if we were in the same building, I never went to your gala, and you never came to Diane's party. So how does that... How did we even..." She stopped. He watched her. "I don't know," she said. "I can't make the pieces fit." He leaned forward. "Walk me through the rest of your night, after the party." She exhaled. "Michel was late. He was always late. He called me and told me to go up to the room he had booked and wait for him." She paused. "I had been drinking. A lot. More than was sensible. Things between us were bad, and I was trying to get through the night." She looked at the table. "I went up to the room and waited. That's all I remember clearly. The rest of the night is hazy." ___. "Soyeon was flying in from Seoul," he said quietly. "She called me and said she had booked a room, told me to go up when I was ready and she would meet me. He paused. I had been drinking too. The negotiations that week had broken me down, and I had not been careful about how much I was consuming. He stopped for a moment. I went up to the room. That part I remember. I remember the hallway. I remember the door. She nodded slowly. And I don't understand the rest of it either. Not in a way that connects to you. He shook his head. I woke up the next morning and So-yeon was there, and I told myself I had just passed out. I didn't examine it. They sat quietly for a moment. The math was there, but the answer wasn't. They were circling the same building on the same night with the same story, about going up to a room, and the connection was right there somewhere, just slightly out of reach, and neither of them could put their finger on it. Then she said it, casually, almost as an afterthought, or the way you mention something that has always seemed small. The only odd thing I ever remembered about that whole period, she said, was Michial. When he finally showed up that night, she made a small gesture. He wanted to be together, which was strange because we had already, earlier that night I thought he had come up early, and we had. She stopped. She frowned slightly, like she was hearing herself say it out loud for the first time. I always thought it was strange that he wanted to go twice in one night. That wasn't like him. That wasn't like us at that point. Jae-won had gone very still. What hotel? He said. She looked at him. Something in his voice had changed. What? The hotel. What was the name of the hotel? Hilton Club, the Quinn. He closed his eyes for just a second. No, that's where I was staying. The air shifted. What room did Michael book? He asked. His voice was very quiet now. 6, she said slowly. Room 6. He opened his eyes and looked at her. So-yeon booked room 9. Neither of them breathed for a moment. Jae-won, she said. Same floor, he said. Same hallway. He leaned forward and pressed both hands flat on the table, like he needed something solid. I was drunk. I took the elevator up. I remember the hallway being quiet, and I remember the door being unlocked, and I walked in and He stopped. I didn't check the number. I just assumed. She said she would be there, so I assumed the room was right. Naomi's hand came up slowly and covered her mouth. You came in and sat on the bed, she said, almost a whisper. And I came out of the bathroom and I thought you were Michael, because he said he was 20 minutes away, and I thought he had made better time. Her eyes were wide. I didn't turn the light on. I didn't look closely. I thought you were him. And I thought you were her, he said. The silence that followed was the loudest silence the room had ever held. A wrong door, a dark room, 2 people drunk and heartbroken, and each of them waiting for someone who had not yet arrived. That was all it was. That was the whole explanation. Not conspiracy, not anything dramatic. Just a man who misread a room number in a dim hallway, and a woman who didn't turn on a light. And somehow, out of that small accidental collision of 2 wrong people in one wrong room, there was a 2-year-old boy asleep down the hall who had both their eyes. No one suspected anything, she said quietly, because neither of us had any reason to. We both went back to our own lives, he said, and we both assumed it was our own partners. She sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked back at him. A wrong door, he said. She sat with that for a moment. Jae-won. She said his name carefully. I need you to understand that I'm not angry. I want to say that first. He looked at her. But I need you to understand what that night cost me. Not the night itself, the aftermath. Her voice was steady. She had done this work. She knew how to hold it without drowning. 2 years of raising Eli alone. 2 years of Michael's denial sitting in my chest like it was my fault. 2 years of looking at my son's eyes and not knowing. She paused. That's what came out of a wrong door. He didn't say anything for a moment, and when he did speak, it was without defense, without explanation, without any of the soft language men sometimes use to make apologies about themselves. I know, he said. I can't give those 2 years back. I can't fix what you carried alone. I'm sorry. Not because it's the right thing to say, but because I mean it. Every part of it. The carelessness of that night and everything it caused that I didn't know I was causing. He held her gaze. I'm sorry, Naomi. She believed him. That was the thing. She looked at him across the table in the quiet of that kitchen, and she believed him completely, and that was its own complicated feeling to sit with. It was no one's fault, she said finally. Not entirely. We were both reckless that night, and both engaged to people who were, as it turns out, doing their own faithless things in the background. She almost laughed. It came out soft. We were both being idiots in different rooms of the same hotel. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter than a smile. That's a generous way to look at it. I'm a generous person, she said. Don't push it. This time he did smile, just slightly, and she looked away before it could do whatever it was trying to do to her. The weeks after that conversation had a different quality. Something had been released, not resolved exactly. There was still so much that was new and uncertain and careful between them. But the not knowing was gone, and the not knowing had been the heaviest part. He was good with Eli in a way that was becoming harder to qualify as surprising. It was just true. He was patient in that specific way that children need, the way that doesn't perform itself, that just shows up consistently and quietly until the child stops testing it. Eli had stopped testing it around day 4. Now he simply accepted Jaewon as a fixture of his small world, climbed on him without warning, demanded his attention at inconvenient moments, and fell asleep against him with the total trust of a child who has decided someone is safe. She was watching all of this one evening when Jaewon sat down next to her while Eli napped and said, I want to say something, and I want you to hear it properly. She turned. I want to be present, he said. Not because the test said I should be. Not out of obligation or duty or any of the things people say when they're doing something for the wrong reasons. I want to be here because he is my son and because you are. He paused, chose carefully. Because I want to earn the right to show up, for both of you. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking you to feel anything you don't feel. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want you to let me show up. She was quiet for a moment. He deserves his father, she said. Yes. And you've been... She stopped. Started again. You've been good. You've been exactly what you said you would be. I meant what I said. I know, she looked at him. Okay, we do this carefully. We do it at the right pace for Eli, and if at any point it stops feeling right, you tell me and we adjust, he said immediately. Always. She nodded, and something between them settled into a new shape, and something that didn't have a name yet, but had weight and warmth, and the particular feeling of a thing that had been decided properly. 3 days later, Michael Webb appeared. She found out from the front desk, calling up to the penthouse to say there was a man in the lobby asking for her. She knew before she heard the name. She went down because she was not the kind of woman who sent other people to handle her problems, and she found him standing near the entrance in a jacket she recognized, looking like a man who had rehearsed something. I heard, he said, about the other guy, about him stepping up. He paused. Naomi, that's my son. She looked at him for a long time. You told me he wasn't. I know what I said. You said it more than once, Michelle. You said it to my face while I was 3 months pregnant and completely alone, and you said it without blinking. Her voice was even. She was proud of how even it was. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was scared. I know you were. She crossed her arms. But Eli doesn't need you to show up now because someone else showed up first. That's not how this works. Michiel opened his mouth, then he stopped, because Jaewon had come to stand beside her, and he had not come loudly or dramatically. He had simply arrived, quiet and still in a dark jacket, and stood where he was with his hands in his pockets and said nothing at all. He didn't need to say anything. That was the thing about Jae-won-oh. The rooms knew he was there without him announcing it. Michael looked at him, then back at Naomi, then at the floor. What happened in the next 5 minutes, Naomi only caught pieces of. Jae-won asked her to give him a moment and she stepped back, and the two men moved to a quieter corner of the lobby, and the conversation was short. She couldn't hear it. She didn't need to. She watched Michiel's posture change when a person has understood something clearly and completely and has no argument left. When Jae-won came back to her, his expression was the same as it always was, calm, composed. "He won't be back," he said simply. She looked over his shoulder. Michiel was already at the door. "What did you say to him?" "The truth," Jae-won said, clearly. She decided not to ask for more than that. Some things didn't need the details. It was a Tuesday evening when he brought it up. Eli was asleep. As they were at the kitchen table with the remnants of dinner still between them, and she was telling him something about Eli's new word. He had started saying more, with great authority and deploying it constantly. And Jae-won was smiling at the story in the way he smiled at most things involving Eli, like the boy was genuinely the most interesting person he had ever met. Then he said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond." She looked at him. "Okay. Come to Seoul." She was quiet. "Not temporarily," he said. "Not as a trial. I want you and Eli to come home with me. Properly. I want to build something real, and I want to build it in one place, and I want that place to be where I can actually show up every day, not across an ocean." She looked down at the table. "Jae-won, I know what I'm asking. Do you?" She looked up. "I was born here. I have lived in New York my entire life. I know it hasn't been kind to me lately, but it's still mine. It's still what I know." She paused. "I had a plan. The UK, my cousin. It wasn't much, but it was a plan I made myself, and it was mine." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking you to abandon that. I'm not asking you to trade one uncertain thing for another." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to trade it for something certain, something I will make certain." He looked at her steadily. "You're not losing your life, Naomi. You're starting a new one." She didn't answer immediately. She got up and went to the window and stood there looking out at the city for a long time. He didn't fill the silence. He had learned early that she needed space to think, and that the worst thing he could do was crowd her inside it. She thought about her cousin's spare room in London. She thought about the job possibility that was still just a possibility. She thought about the plan she had made in desperation, built out of the wreckage of everything that had fallen apart, the plan that was really just a direction, just a way, just somewhere that wasn't here. She had been so focused on leaving that she had never stopped to ask herself what she actually wanted to arrive at. She turned around. "What does Seoul look like? For us? Actually?" Something in him settled. He had been holding himself very carefully, and she could see him release it. "I have a house," he said. "Not the kind of life I've been living here. I've been thinking about this for weeks, about what it would need to look like to be right for Eli, for you." He paused. "I want to restructure things, pull back from the parts of my work that don't belong in a home with a child in it. I have people I trust. I can do that." He said it simply, without drama, like it was already decided. "I want to give you a safe home. That's what I want to give you both." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've already been thinking about restructuring." "Yes. For how long?" "Since about day 3, he said, when Eli fell asleep on my arm and I sat there for 10 minutes because I didn't want to move him." She laughed softly. She couldn't help it. She looked at the ceiling and then back at him, and she thought about her son's face and his face, and the wrong door, and the long, impossible chain of accidents that had somehow led to this kitchen on this Tuesday evening. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. Okay. Seoul, she said. We'll come to Seoul. Seoul was nothing like New York, and everything she hadn't known she needed. The house was in a quieter part of the city. It was large but not cold. It had a garden. It had a room for Eli that Jae-won had asked her opinion on before anything was ordered for it, and she had appreciated that more than she said. The staff were warm and unhurried. The neighborhood was calm. She could hear birds in the morning, which was not something that had ever been true of any place she had lived in New York. She enrolled in Korean language classes 3 weeks after arriving. The teacher was a small, cheerful woman who told her pronunciation was terrible and that she would be fluent in a year, both delivered with equal confidence. She called her cousin in London every Sunday, and her cousin said she sounded different. Eli took to Seoul the way Eli took to most things, with complete and immediate acceptance, as though the world was simply whatever room he happened to be standing in. He learned 2 Korean words before Naomi learned one. Jae-won thought this was the funniest thing that had ever happened. She pretended to be offended and was secretly delighted. Jae-won had kept his word about restructuring. She watched him do it without fanfare. Meetings moved, certain associates kept at a distance, his hours changed. Now his phone put down more often. He did not announce any of it. He just did it the way he did everything, quietly and completely, and let the results speak. He was home for dinner most nights. He was present in the way that mattered, the way she had spent years understanding the absence of. It was a Saturday in late spring when he asked her to walk with him to the park at the end of their street. Eli was already running ahead of them the moment they passed through the gate, making for the open grass with the single-minded urgency of a 2-year-old who has spotted space and intends to use all of it. They walked slowly. The afternoon light was soft, and the park was not crowded, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing music quietly enough that it was more feeling than sound. She had her hands in the pockets of her jacket, and she was watching Eli careen across the grass, and she was thinking about nothing in particular, which was something she had learned to do again since coming here. Just existing inside a moment, without bracing for what came next. She felt Jae-won slow beside her. She looked over. He had stopped walking. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, or rather, she had seen pieces of it at different times. The stillness, the openness, the way his careful composure went soft around the edges when he wasn't managing it. But she had not seen all of it together like this, undisguised and unhurried. He reached into his jacket pocket. "I need you to know something first," he said. "Before you see what's in my hand, I need you to know that this is not about Eli. It's not about doing the right thing or making something official." He paused. "I'm doing this because somewhere between a departure hall and a wrong door, and a DNA result, and every quiet morning in this house, I fell in love with you. And I would like, if you'll let me, to spend the rest of my life showing up for you the way you deserve to have someone show up." He opened the box. She looked at it, then at him. Eli came running back across the grass and crashed into Jae-won's legs and grabbed his trouser leg and looked up at the box with great curiosity and said, "More," because it was still his solution to most situations. Naomi laughed. It came from somewhere real and deep, and she didn't try to contain it. "Yes," she said. Jae-won looked up at her. "Yes?" "Yes," she said again. Steadier this time. Certain. He exhaled. She watched the relief move through him, and she understood it, because she felt it too. The particular relief of saying the true thing out loud and having it land somewhere safe. He put the ring on her finger and picked Eli up in the same motion and stood there with their son on his hip and looked at her in the park light. "I never believed in fate," he said softly. "Until you. And that's it, lovelies. I don't know about you, but this one got me. The idea that the thing you've been searching for could have been standing right next to you in a hallway 3 years ago, and neither of you even knew. That fate doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just slips through the wrong door and changes everything without asking permission. If this story moved you, if you found yourself holding your breath somewhere in that conversation over dinner, or smiling at a little boy saying more at the most inconvenient moment, then you already know why I love telling stories like this one. And if you are new here, welcome, lovely. This is what we do. We tell stories that feel true even when they are fiction, stories about people finding each other in the most impossible ways, stories that remind you that the worst night of your life might just be the first page of something beautiful. Please give this video a thumbs up if you made it all the way to Seoul with us. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and it lets me know you want more of them. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is a really good time. Hit that button, turn on your notifications, heart and come back next time because the next story is already waiting, and I promise you it is worth staying for. Until then, take care of yourselves, lovelies. And remember, sometimes the wrong door is exactly the right one. See you next time.